House. Now he appears to be at odds with his former boss, to put it mildly. In an upcoming book, Bannon is quoted as saying that a meeting between the Trump campaign, its officials, and a Russian lawyer back in 2016 may have been, quote, treason and unpatriotic. Well, the president responded almost immediately with a statement as pungent as it was direct. Here are a few selected passages. Quote, Steve Bannon has nothing to do with me or my presidency. When he was fired, he not only lost his job, he lost his mind. Steve was a staffer who worked for me after I'd already won the nomination by defeating 17 candidates. Now that he's on his own, Steve is learning that winning is not as easy as I make it look. Steve had very little to do with our historic victory, which was delivered by the forgotten men and women of this country. Yet Steve had everything to do with the loss of a Senate seat in Alabama held for more than 30 years by Republicans. Steve does not represent my base. He's only in it for himself. We have many great Republican members of Congress and candidates who are very supportive of the Make America Great Again agenda. Like me, they love the United States of America and are helping to finally take our country back and build it up rather than simply seeking to burn it all down. Pretty amusing. And there's some truth in there for sure, but don't let that obscure the larger truth. The ideological gulf between the president and Steve Bannon is small. This is not a fight over ideas. It's a fight over who deserves credit for an election win. Talk about missing the point. The legacy of 2016 is not a single person, any person. It's a set of ideas, the ones that reflect the hopes and the needs and the fears and the aspirations of a badly mistreated American middle class. Those voters came to the polls because they wanted real borders, higher wages, dignified jobs. They were dispirited by the opioid epidemic. Why wouldn't they be? They were sick of being lectured by a political class in Washington that despises them and holds them in contempt. They revere their country, but they had come to recognize that it is hard to make the rest of the world better and very easy to make it worse. Above all, they voted for leadership that promised to put Americans first above any foreign nation or domestic interest group. That is the real legacy of 2016, that agenda. And getting it done is the central duty of this administration, regardless of who staffs it. Matt Schlapp is the chairman of the American Conservative Union, and he joins us tonight. Matt, good to see you.
Good to see you, Tucker.
So we had a lot of different lead segments in mind because there's a lot going on in the world. This statement kind of overtook the entire news cycle here in Washington, and I'm still trying, all these hours later, to figure out exactly what this is about. Who is served by this argument, and what does it represent?
Well, I think the only people that were happy today were the people on other cable news shows that are prosecuting the case against who was a legitimately elected president. Hashtag resistance and all the forces that feel a little wind in their sails because of this statement from Steve Bannon, which is over the line, inappropriate, and he really should take it back because I know that he doesn't believe what he said.
Which statement are you referring to?
The idea that Jared Kushner or Don Jr. are traitors or acted in a treasonous way.
They're unpatriotic.
Yeah, or treasonous is way beyond the pale, and he ought to take it back because that's really not what this is about. Because what he said earlier is that this investigation was a canard, that there was no Russia collusion, that he saw nothing inappropriate, and I think that's where the American people who are good-natured and fair are going to come down on this whole set of questions. And this is going to be a drama that we're going to have to deal with over the next couple days. But I think it's a very unfortunate thing.
So if you get toward the bottom of the president's statement, very colorful statement, he says this: Steve doesn't represent my base. He's only in it for himself. That seems like the nub of it here, the debate over who represents Trump's voters. Is it the president or is it his chief strategist, Steve Bannon? What's the answer?
The conservative movement is not aligned to any one person, but they are head over heels overjoyed with the first year of the Trump presidency and the Trump agenda. They know that we could be looking at 1 or 2 additional Supreme Court openings potentially in 2018, and they know that there's going to be a huge election at the end of this year where the majority in the Senate and the House are up for grabs. And they believe, they might have been unsure about Trump in the beginning, but they're not unsure about him now, Tucker. And there's no question as to whether or not who their allegiance is with. It's the leader of their party. It's the president of the United States, and it's the agenda he's pushing. And Steve Bannon is for that agenda, too. So why do anything to help hashtag resistance, which is all about trying to delegitimize Trump? And I think that's where Steve made a big mistake with his talking to a very left-wing journalist who he shouldn't even be talking to.
That journalist is not very left-wing, by the way, Mike.
Well,
I just in point of fact, I don't think he is. And it wasn't just in that conversation.
Do you think that this journalist is somebody who he should talk to in this manner in order to really try to harm the Trump agenda? I don't think it's smart.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying
Right.
I have confidence that that journalist, Michael Wolff, is accurately representing the quote that he heard, because I think he's an honest journalist.
Well, I'm not questioning
and
that part.
I don't think he has an ideological agenda here. What I'm struck by is the fact that it was said in the first place by Steve Bannon, and I wonder
Exactly.
why. Well, that's the question. Why? What's the point of this?
I think the point is that when you're a staffer at the White House, you're a staffer. By the way, he did this as a staffer.
Right.
You serve a president. I've served a president, right? And you don't talk to journalists, whether on the record or off the record in any way, to try to harm the agenda. If you're trying to harm the agenda, who's disloyal?
But this is not the first time. I mean, it's not just
well, it doesn't matter.
This, Michael. Right. No, but I'm just saying, in 5 different interviews in the past couple of months, you have seen direct attacks on Trump by Bannon, or attacks that clearly came from Bannon. And I'm just wondering, is there a point to this? Where's this going? I mean, you're one of the leaders of the institutional conservative movement in Washington. Right. Do you see Steve Bannon leading part of it 5 years from now?
I think Steve Bannon is an important voice, but I think he's greatly marginalized his voice, because what this looks personal, this looks petty. It's about who did the most to help Donald Trump win. It's about revision, and it helps the left. And I think activists around this country, conservative activists, see this for what it is. It's a distraction on President Trump and conservative Republicans pushing this great agenda. And anything that gets in the way of that agenda, certainly when it's about ego, and claiming credit, is a distraction. And so I think he hurts himself unless he comes out and says, look, I might have disagreements with Jared Kushner or Donald Trump Jr., but I don't think there's anything to this investigation, because that's what all of his other public comments have said.
Right. And very quickly, there have been reports that he is considering running for president in 2020. Is that true? And does he have a shot, do you think?
He does not have a shot, period. And he certainly doesn't have a shot in a Republican primary. No one is going to run to the right of Donald Trump, Tucker. He has captured that by making this commitment to conservatives with this agenda and delivering on the agenda. It's ironclad.
Matt Schlapp. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Tucker.
Keith Koffler has spent a lot of time thinking about Steve Bannon. He is the author of the book Bannon, Always the Rebel. Some would say the definitive biography of Stephen K. Bannon. Keith, great to see you.
I would say that too. Thank you, Tucker.
So what is, you know Bannon well.
Yes.
You wrote a book about him.
Right.
What's the point of this? He doesn't do things, presumably, for no reason.
I think that he was angry. I think that at the time he said that, it could have been either July or right after, because they said it was soon after a July story in the New York Times. So it didn't have to be while he was still a staffer. It might have come in August, right after he left the White House. I'm not sure. Either way, he was involved in these vicious internecine struggles within the White House.
Right.
I don't think there's necessarily a point to this. I think he might roll it back if he could at this point. I doubt he will. But I differ a little bit on the results of this, because I think that the person, what happened here is that the president issued a statement condemning an individual. I've covered the White House for 20 years. I've never seen that.
Right.
Maybe Osama bin Laden. Other than that, I've never seen an official presidential statement condemning an individual. Bannon is not going to react well to this. He probably already has had some trouble with Trump's flirtation with a DACA deal, maybe even a little bit with the tax cut. The problem for Trump is this. He has basically declared war on Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon likes wars, and I think he's going to go for it. He may not come out immediately against Trump, but little by little, he may end up picking apart Trump. And the problem for Trump is that Bannon is his conduit to the base, his best conduit to the base. If he loses Bannon, he cannot afford to lose a lot of the base. He may think he won the popular vote, but he didn't. The base is what elected him, and he needs Bannon to support him in that.
So you think that Trump voters trust Steve Bannon more than they trust Donald Trump?
No, I'm not saying that, although Bannon is a rock star among the populist voters that elected Trump. What I'm saying is that if Bannon does even a little damage to Trump, which he could do, let's say Trump wins the war, if there is a war, against Bannon. If Bannon damages him even a little bit, Trump cannot afford that. And Breitbart News and Bannon himself is the most important conduit to the base that Trump has, other than Trump himself. Let's be clear. Trump is the best person for that. But look how many votes he won by, 60,000 votes turned in the election. He loses it. If it's another type of election like that, and he's got one of his premier spokesmen, and he's also been a spokesman for Bannon for many months, against him, then, Trump can have a problem.
So let me just, since you know his mind, let me ask you the question I asked Matt Schlapp, which is, this is clearly not an isolated occurrence of him attacking Trump. He's been doing this, or through, in effect, cutouts. He's been doing this for months.
Right.
What's the point? What's he trying to get out of that?
Well, I mean, mostly he's been supportive of Trump. I mean, the people that he is angry with are the people around Trump. And, Ivanka Trump, Jared Kushner, who he calls Javanka, he's been doing that without severe penalty for quite a while now. Now, and you can understand Trump being upset that his son is being called treasonous, of course. But I think that, what he is trying to do is marginalize people within the White House who have a more establishment Republican agenda and keep Trump's ear and keep Trump focused on the things that he was elected on, not on his base. Trump, it's family over everything. Trump loves his family.
Right.
But in terms of his personality and his actual political beliefs, he's actually a lot closer to Steve Bannon than he is to Ivanka Trump.
It sure seems that way.
Yeah.
Keith Koffler, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Voice on this question.